all charged up. Now, we have a very nice part prepared for us by Brother Stannard. Very important. Will you heed Jehovah's clear warnings? Brother Stannard. We're certainly thankful, aren't we, that Jehovah provides us with clear warnings and reminders. He's done it for all his servants over the many years. And tonight we're going to look at a warning that Jehovah has given us very carefully. And this has to do with apostasy. We're going to talk about what is apostasy, look at some examples of it. We're also going to look at how do apostates operate. And finally, and most importantly, how do we protect ourselves from apostasy? So that's what we're going to consider as we go through this evening. So then, what is apostasy? Well, the Reasoning book has a nice definition. It says apostasy is abandoning or deserting the worship and service of God. In effect, a rebellion against Jehovah God. So, when you think of that, who would be the foremost apostate? Well, Jesus identified him as Satan the devil. In John 8:44, he said, Satan did not stand fast in the truth. So Satan knew the truth, but he elected to leave Jehovah's organization. He rebelled against Jehovah. He deserted that. He became an apostate. And of course, Satan himself then is going to use that same strategy to get at Jehovah's servants and seduce them over the years. In fact, he used it right away with Adam and Eve. He lied to them, and then Adam and Eve apostatized. A little later in history, King Jeroboam, I don't know if you remember him, he was king of the northern 10-tribe kingdom of Israel when they had split. The north had 10 and 2 were down in the bottom. But in Judah, where Jerusalem was, that was the center of pure worship. Jeroboam got jealous, and he didn't want his people going down to Judah. So what did he do? He rebelled. He turned against Jehovah. He set up his own religion. He set up a couple golden calves for people to worship. He even made up his own religion and songs. So if you'd been living back at that time in that kingdom where Jeroboam ruled, what would you have done? Those who were loyal to Jehovah immediately left and went down to Judah. They left their inheritance behind. And those that happened to be already in Judah, they didn't go back. They stayed there. They forego all that because they realized the dangers of living and being associating in that apostate environment. But what about the first century? Well, the first century congregation, the Christian congregation, apostasy occurred there as well. Open your Bibles, and Paul talks about this in Acts, the 20th chapter. 20th chapter of Acts, verses 29 and 30. And Paul makes this point. He says, I know that after my going away, oppressive wolves will enter in among you and will not treat the flock with tenderness. And from among you, yourselves, men will rise and speak twisted things to draw away the disciples after them. What was he talking about? Apostasy. See, it was coming from among the congregation itself. Men were going to draw away others. That's exactly the definition of what apostasy is, and speak twisted things. And did that occur? Absolutely. After the death of the apostles, a great apostasy set in, and that led to the development of Christendom. Well, so then, that's what apostasy is. We saw some examples of it. How do apostates operate? Well, apostates may claim to worship Jehovah. They may claim to believe in the Bible, but they'll reject Jehovah's visible organization here on earth. In fact, some will even return back to the practices that they had left when they came into the truth, going back in effect to Babylon the Great. But beyond that, just like we read there in Acts, they're not content just to leave. They want to take others with them. They want, instead of going out and making their own religion like Jeroboam did there, rather they want to take those in the congregation with them and draw them away. So that is the goal of an apostate. Now they might do this in a very overt fashion. You might recall when we used to go to the conventions in Tacoma, Washington, I'm sure you had the same thing in areas around here. You go to the arena and it might be encircled by apostates. You had to run a gauntlet to get through the signs. They wanted to engage you in a conversation. They wanted to give you literature to read. But you could just get right through and get inside and not even have to talk to them. But that's not the only way that apostates work. 2 Peter, the 2nd chapter, identifies something more insidious. You open your Bibles there to 2 Peter. Second chapter, starting there in verse 1. Peter states, however, there also came to be false prophets among the people, as there will also be false teachers among you. So identifying apostates here, these will quietly bring in destructive sects, and they will even disown the owner who brought them, bringing speedy destruction upon themselves. So notice the manner that these ones will work, very subtly, very quietly, introducing their views. And this can be done with simple changes of words, counterfeit words, false arguments, tricky discussions, fabricated ideas, twisting the scriptures to meet their own view or taking them out of context. Paul made a point in Colossians, the 2nd chapter, verse 8, about what their goal was in doing this. If you look there, Colossians, the 2nd chapter, in verse 8. He says, look out, and here's a warning, that no one takes you captive by means of the philosophy and empty deceptions, according to the traditions, according to the elementary things of the world, and not according to Christ. So this is what they try to do. They're really like a kidnapper trying to carry away a victim who's unsuspecting. They're very malicious at doing this. Their intent is actually to deceive ones and to meet their own needs. Many times they raise frivolous questions that are really pointless, that ends to hours and hours of research that go to no end. Of course, this is what the mechanics of what they're doing, but how do they reach individuals? Well, they use forms of mass communication. I think we're all familiar with where this would be. TV shows, and of course, the internet would be one of the main ways of doing this. And isn't it unfortunate? I think we've seen this happen where some we've met in the field ministry and they begin to make progress and they see the truth that is there. And then they go research online. And what happens? They come across apostate sites. And so that can dissuade them many times. And even our brothers and sisters can unwittingly come across apostate information. It was funny the other day at the Fargo convention, Michelle and I got back at the end of the day. We were just going to sit there and watch the news and see what the weather was going to be. So we turned the TV on. It was just 5 minutes before the news started. There's a talk show on. And it was a rather well-known talk show host, a doctor. Maybe he's a real doctor, I don't know. But guess what? He was interviewing an apostate. And then he was giving out information about where, if you wanted to escape, you could go to these apostates and get more information. Right there on that talk show, just accidentally turning to it, and it was there. So it's very easy for apostates to get their information out. So what do we have to do? How do we protect ourselves from this? The Bible's counsel on protecting ourselves is very clear. Very important scripture here. If you go to Romans, the 16th chapter, and verse 17. From the 16:17. Now I urge you, brothers, to keep your eye on those who create divisions and causes for stumbling contrary to the teachings that you have learned, and avoid them. So he's identifying people who are doing teachings contrary to what they have learned. Apostate leanings. He says to simply avoid them. Other translations say turn away from them, keep away from them, stay away from them. There's nothing ambiguous about this statement. If a doctor told you to stay away from someone who had a disease that was deadly and contagious, well, you know exactly what he's talking about, right? And that's the same thing that Jehovah's telling us here, to avoid contact with these ones. That's how we're going to be able to protect ourselves. The Apostle John gives more information about this in 2 John 10 and 11. This manner in which we can protect ourselves from apostasy. 2 John verse 10 and 11. And note what he says here. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your homes or say a greeting to him. For the one who says a greeting to him is a sharer in his wicked works, not even bringing them into our home. Now, of course, you might say, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't bring an apostate into my home. But avoiding all contact means we wouldn't be bringing him into our home via our television or via the internet, because it certainly could corrupt our thinking if we did that. That's where we have to be careful about curiosity. Curiosity killed the cat, right? You can get started by looking at these things in a curious way. So we need to refuse to read their literature, watch their TV programs, examine their websites, and not get caught up in blogs and so forth where you add comments and be drawn in trying to defend the truth only to find out that it's an apostate site. We have to keep on our guard and our thinking, because Satan can make some things seem very plausible when they are not. And of course, Satan is the master of deception. Unfortunately, this happened to Andre. He had served Jehovah for years, but he had the bitter experience of being led astray by apostate thinking. He just felt that having a quick look at an apostate website would not be dangerous. Here's what he said. These are his words. Initially, I was attracted to the so-called truths that the apostates spoke of. The more I examined what they said, the more I came to think that I was justified in leaving Jehovah's organization. But later, as I did some research on the apostates' arguments against Jehovah's Witnesses, I became aware of how crafty the false teachers were. Information was taken out of context, and that was their strong evidence against us. Thus, I decided to start reading our publications again and to attend meetings. Soon, I realized how much I had missed. And happily, Andre now has returned to the congregation. So then, we certainly love Jehovah's organization. It's through Jehovah's organization that we've learned the truth, the pure truth. Think back to the time before you didn't know the truth. All the things that you've come to know, His name, the hope of the resurrection, the truth about life after death, God's purpose for the earth. Think about those things. They are precious truths that we have, and no one else can take those away from us. So then, no matter what false teachers or apostates may say, we do not follow them. We don't buy them, because if we do, we'll be bitterly disappointed, just like Andre is. So instead, let us be determined to heed Jehovah's warning and remain loyal to him and his organization, because this organization has a long track record, a proven track record of providing us pure and unadulterated, refreshing waters of truth from God's inspired word.